Bodymind here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What do you think of it so far?
I like it. It's very tea.
Yes.
I'm waiting to feel what I might feel.
Yeah,
A
nothing
little bit of
crazy.
focus.
Maybe some clarity, a little bit of
Oxidation.
oxidation.
Wow, that sounds bad.
I
That's
love
catabolic.
Yeah,
Antioxidation.
yeah, maybe a little bit of antioxidation.
Whatever you want to call it. Cool, man.
So we're podcasting it today.
Mm-hmm.
What are we talking about?
Body-mind connection.
The relationships.
The relationship between the body and the mind. Yeah.
How it relates to language, essentially.
Yes.
Right?
So I feel like starting with something as extreme as like Colin's experience with that could probably be a good way to start.
Where to begin?
Yeah.
Give me a little bit of a prompt to get into it here.
So how with your experience with your lungs and how that has impacted your mind, right? Like you like start from the beginning of when you started to see that relationship and give a little explanation as to what physically was going on.
So
is going on.
Yeah. I grew up always being like very physically active and probably finding, like many people, a lot of peace and clarity in physical movement and especially cardio. I was a big runner. I like to swim, stuff like that. All throughout my entire life, I kind of stayed along that path, especially when I was in the Army. It just, no matter what went wrong, you could move your way out of it, literally. You know, the Goggins style approach, just keep running.
Yeah, that's what they all say.
And, you know, the first time that rule was confronted was when I got the diagnosis of lung cancer, because I had, the doctors had misdiagnosed me a few times with pneumonia. At the time I was wheezing. We didn't know what was wrong, but I was struggling to keep up with my previous like run times and didn't know what was happening. Ended up having a surgery to remove the tumor that was in my lung and the lymph nodes around it. It's called a bronchial sleeve resection, where they cut me open like they would be doing a lobectomy. So from the back, broke open my ribs. Went in, took my lung out, cut the bronchial until there were no more margins having cancer on it, and then put everything back in. And going from someone who could like breathe easily and move easily my whole life to someone who struggled for breath was a big transition. And I started to understand that over time, it took me a while to figure this out, that the amount of breathing I was doing, the type of breathing I was doing, was impacting my perception of the world around me.
Wow.
Because my breathing was shorter by nature after having that surgery. And I feel like it put my body in this, it maybe didn't put my body in this state of fight or flight, but it kept me there.
Sure. Yeah.
And so as I was learning my new limits post-surgery and trying to recover and trying to get better at breathing, I had to change my relationship with breathing. Because I very quickly realized that if I wasn't breathing right, which at first was most of the time, then the thoughts that followed were going to be driven by my amygdala and driven by fear. Just by like it, and that might sound woo-woo to some people, but we see it in our human behavior in mimicry and mirroring, where if I am engaging with you and you're displaying an emotion, I mirror it, and that helps me feel the emotion. So it's just like the input and the output. But in my case, it was the breathing. The breathing pattern that I was doing was designed for someone who was in fight or flight. And so because that became my default breathing, I kind of stayed there.
Sure. So can you describe the breathing that you're doing? Is it like short, shallow breaths?
Yeah, I still do it when I'm not being attentive.
You don't have as much space as you used to.
Right.
So that makes sense. Your breathing is going to be different than you used to.
And if I'm like lying down on the couch and I'm not doing anything, I can find my breath coming back to it. It's like you barely even notice that I'm breathing. Just the smallest amount of effort in and out. And I have to be conscious about.
Yeah.
And I have to be conscious about having that second part of my breath these days, because if I don't do it all the way, then I won't breathe in all the way.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I think it's good for people to understand. For anyone who doesn't know, we breathe 22,000 breaths a day.
Something like that.
It's something subconscious too, right? We don't necessarily always think about it. And for anyone who has anxiety or has had a panic attack, they're short, shallow breaths.
Mm-hmm.
So when you were breathing short, shallow breaths, why you were going into fight or flight was you're giving yourself anxiety.
Yeah.
You're giving yourself anxiety.
It's hyperventilating, but
So-
it wasn't a conscious choice, obviously.
Right, no.
Given the condition,
But
it's
see,
hyperventilation.
the thing about that is, like, I had never consciously had a panic attack before. I'm
Right.
sure I've been in plenty of
I don't know if people consciously have a panic attack.
Well, I came into the point where I was able to consciously have a panic attack, because I remember specifically, like, one time getting off of a plane, and I was asleep on the plane. The plane woke me up as it landed, and I came out of it with a big, like, sharp, shallow breath. And it felt like I hadn't been breathing for a while, which is like the feeling I get sometimes when I wake up. And immediately went into those short, shallow breaths, because I was sitting in a plane like this for a couple hours.
Yeah.
Which, my body after surgery was in this, like, perpetually closed off kind of position. And it took and my breathing was affected by that too, until I was able to open everything back up again and start breathing.
So yeah, that's a good segue into opening the body, right?
Yeah.
Opening the breath, opening the body. So what kind of, like, I don't know, I guess, how did that come about? How did you consciously start to realize that you did need to open up? You did need to expand that area physically so that you could breathe deeper?
So I think throughout my entire life, I had been doing workouts that were compression related.
No shit.
Which which I think most people are accustomed with.
Yeah.
And beyond, like, the stretch before, stretch after workout, I'd never thought about my body like that.
Yeah.
Working out in the Army versus working out for cross country or rowing or any of the other things I've worked out for in my life is always just like the output and the input was along I hate to go there with it, but it's like along some construct that we created as humans, whether it's like a organized sport or the purpose and standards of physical fitness in the military.
Yeah.
And none of it was ever designed around just being a person, like inhabiting a human body.
Wow,
it's a good way of putting it.
And so when I'd always done yoga. I'm sure we've all heard this 1,000 times, but I'd never done yoga.
Okay.
And it wasn't until we did start having those conversations, and you'd hit me with great one-liners about opening my heart, stuff like that I started you planted a seed, and I started to think about that stuff in a different way. And like, over time after my surgery, I was actually, like, losing touch with my body more and more.
Sure.
So I thought that, me being like Ranger Colin, I was like, okay, I'll come out of this surgery and I'll just, like, get back to it.
Yeah.
And that's what I did at first.
Okay.
But I was just using, like, the old style of doing it. I was going back into compression. So I was taking, like, a already injured body, like, not only, like, the injuries from surgery, but, like, injuries from my time in the Army and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And making them worse by just doing the same stuff I did before, which might have been able to continue had I not had the surgery.
Sure.
But but nonetheless, like, the stuff I was doing to get out of it was just like getting back into the gym, getting back into squatting, getting back into deadlifting. I didn't start from ground zero again.
Yeah, I think it's like you're talking about, like, trying to, like, compress and, like, create tension, right? Like, that's like a good, like, a quick fix for a weak area, right? It's just like tension, build up the muscles around it, tension. That can be done, that can be very beneficial. I kind of experienced the same thing with my hip surgeries, like going straight in as, slowly, gradually building up to going back into the, like, highly compressive compound movements was very beneficial at first. But I was just compensating. I was just creating a lot of tension there, and there was not a lot of flow.
Right.
Which kind of caught up to me a bit. What do you think about that?
I mean, it will. I mean, me personally I have not had fortunately any surgeries or gone anything crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
On that note, but I have had my fair deal of injuries, and
Yeah.
the only approach that I found is creating decompression through the
Creating
system
decompression
and a
through the
level
system,
of tensegrity, so like tension and integrity, right, in the system, creating these balances. Right, if we have tension in one area, we'll be long and tight somewhere else, and how can we create balance throughout the whole system? And it's common that people are locked up like this.
Yeah.
More often than not, I see it really with everybody, and it always relates to the breath.
Yeah.
So psyche's number one. We have it in the check system,
Yeah.
the hierarchy of dysfunction, right? Number one is psyche. Number two is respiration and how we're breathing. And, with what you were saying, all of this is going to lock up intercostals, scalenes, all this in the neck, all this in the chest. And it's just necessary to train in a way that makes you human. That whatever your needs are, not always go back into the state of tension, right? So when the nervous system gets riled up and you're in fight or flight, your muscles and your system gets tense. It's like when you walk out of a really good meditation, forget the yoga piece, right?
Yeah.
Yoga can open you up, but you walk out of a really good meditation, for people who are crunched up here, they'll be, I could stand tall. Yeah. I could be in this position.
Because their breath is on point.
Because their breath is on point, but their nervous system is regulated.
Yes.
So those muscles don't really hold as much tension in them anymore.
Sure.
So that's just kind of my thought process from integrated movement science piece of it.
Yeah.
And it all makes so much sense. So then that kind of brings it into the psyche, right? So there's this short respiration, the system tightens up, we get smaller. So how does that affect the psyche?
So I thought it was really interesting, right? Because, I left the military and I had a very rangery mentality about all that stuff. It's like, I'm able to navigate the world and understand and compartmentalize my emotions to progress through X, Y, and Z. But I'd never thought about the psychosomatic component of it. Which is the body sending messages to the mind, and the mind subconsciously receiving them, but then also consciously presenting them. And it consciously presents it a lot of the time for a lot of people in language. Whatever language you know and speak in is how those messages are received. So if you have a body that's in fight or flight, then you're perceiving the world around you and talking about it or thinking about it with language that is influenced by fight or flight. You're afraid of this. You're scared of that. You have anxiety about things. But
these people are out to get me.
Right. They and us and them.
Yeah.
There's there's
no we.
There's an enemy and a non-enemy.
Them.
There's an us. It's an us versus them thing. So you, and that makes sense. Your amygdala being activated would put you in that mindset where you're protecting you and your tribe from a potential threat, right?
Yeah.
But if you're living in, I like to say, a warrior in a garden. It's good to be a warrior, but I'm also good at being in the garden.
Yeah.
And there's no point in having a amygdala influenced thought process when you're living in a garden.
Yeah.
If you do that, then the garden's war. So I think it comes back to changing the words that you're using to describe the feelings that you're receiving. And also knowing, hey, okay, if I'm interpreting this message, this information that's out here in the world, then I'm interpreting it in a light that is making me feel more scared, then guess what? Your thoughts are also sending a message to your body.
Yeah, sure.
Your conscious thoughts. If I think, what is that person thinking about me? What is this person thinking about me? What I wonder if I'm going to make this job. Then do well in this interview or make this presentation well, whatever, then that's sending a message to your body as well.
Yeah.
But your body, your central nervous system, is responding to the conscious thoughts just as much as it is the other way around. So how you think, the language you use to think. That's another weird thing. When I left the Army, I used the language of the Army.
Yes.
And that's just because that's the tribe I was in.
I love how you say that in the past tense.
I still do it. Yeah, that's true.
Mic check.
My radio check.
Radio check.
But the language you use, whether it's English or a specific dialect in English, whether it's yoga instructor English or coach English or
Mhm.
army English or
Yeah.
banker English that like influences how you perceive the world around you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the messages that you're sending to your body. And so what I realized is I was still navigating the world with this like asset threat
Yes.
mindset
Yeah.
of like, this person is an asset, this person is a threat. This environment is an asset, this environment is a threat. And by doing that, I was sending a message to my body
Sure.
to either be afraid
Yeah.
or be open. And it would rarely be open.
Mm.
You just have to change the language.
Change the language.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like thinking about sort of like our talks about visualization, right? And like that positive self-talk, right?
There's so many thoughts about conversations
There's been
about
a lot. There's been a
visualization.
lot of
Yeah.
conversations
Yeah.
like that. But like, you know, working with somebody who needs to develop, like, let's say like somebody with lower back pain, and you can see that they're not utilizing their glutes a lot, right? What do you think about like the visualization of like cueing them, or maybe even like thinking about it? Maybe that wasn't a great explanation, but
I
you
do
get
have
what my
thoughts on the
question-
low back pain actually that ties into here. It's kind of like taking a half step back
Okay.
on perception,
Yeah.
and where our relationship and words can affect pain or facilitate.
I'm getting
pain.
old.
Like thinking
Right.
I'm weak.
Well, yeah, and like a lot of guys
Or
too,
I'm old.
with the whole Goggins thought process, is like this is something that I have to just deal with, or
Yeah.
just push through. I get
Mhm.
guys all the time
Just push
like,
through it.
message me on Instagram, and they're like, "Oh, I like what you're talking about, and I have low back pain. What are a couple of exercises that I can do?"
Couple exercises. Yeah.
It's just like it's not that simple, and like I could like it's really good to package it in that way, right? Because like that's very digestible for a lot of guys.
Okay.
It's just like movement is healing for the
Yeah.
physical body, but
Mhm.
movement is also healing for the mind.
Yes.
And that's where like the coaching structure and thought process of like nothing is bad. There's optimal, suboptimal, and then just like there's like indecision,
Yeah.
and in that world that is just
Mhm.
can be destructive. But we're in a suboptimal situation with this pain, right?
Yes.
We are in a suboptimal situation when we are in danger, but there's a way to figure
Mhm.
things out, and there's a way to work through that, and it's changing the language of how we approach it. Like, this back pain is killing me. It's
Yeah.
just like that back pain will eventually kill you if you keep saying that
Keep
it's gonna
thinking about
kill
that.
you.
Like, I have a weak low back.
Not to
Right.
This back pain is against me. It's not a part of me. It's against me.
well, you're identifying with pain, which I've done.
Sure.
Which you can.
Yeah, I
The
think you gotta
back
be careful how
pain
you do it.
is okay.
Yeah.
So why is there the back pain?
So this is how I do it.
Okay.
I sometimes still do this, but it's like a mindset of like, I'm in pain. I'm getting old. I am X, Y, and Z, as opposed to I am experiencing pain. And I do this for
Experiencing
emotions
pain.
as well. I'm not anxious. I'm experiencing anxiety.
Yeah.
I'm not in pain.
Mhm.
I'm experiencing pain because it's just information. If you identify with it as if I am pain, I am old,
Yes.
then it's more than just information. It's part of who you
It
are.
is creating the reality.
It's
Right.
the identification. I mean, I had a client that was like that for a while, and he would go see this practitioner and that practitioner, and like this
Hop
was his
around.
whole identity.
Yeah.
Is like, I have these issues,
Mm-hmm.
and like, what was the root cause of it? There's trauma involved. There's self-image, right? So like, a lot of guys have gynecomastia out there, that fatty tissue on their chest. And it's just like, I have it. And like, it's not like something that I'm like, doesn't make you want to open up. You want to shy away. So it's just like, you talk about tension. This is another example of the body mind relationship. If I'm unsatisfied and insecure about my chest, I don't want people to see it. I'm going to do this.
I'm going to be here. Yeah.
I'm going to do this all the time. No matter what you do to open
And you
yourself
might even
up,
be drawn
stretches or
more
exercises.
towards push-ups, bench press.
Correct. Because this pattern of no.
Yeah.
This pattern
The
of
pattern
push
of
away.
no. Yeah.
Yes.
The cat.
We talk about training our body. I think that there's also a demographic of people who talk about training their mind in like a rational, logical way, like academia, studying, learning, whatever. But I don't ever think that there's enough conversation about training your emotions.
Training your emotions.
But I think that there's a lot of talk about how to compartmentalize your emotions and navigate a situation without them, which is necessary for some circumstances.
Absolutely.
But also just like creating a contextual understanding of what your emotions are, why they exist, and how to react to them. I think is something that isn't done.
Unless you go to a therapist.
I got a good one.
But hold on, even that is still locked in the rational world, right? Like your feelings are your feelings. They can present in language, but like you feel your feelings. And so
that's part of making the subconscious the unconscious conscious, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like that piece of it would be, how do we make the unconscious conscious so we can rationalize and understand it? But then what do we do once we know about it, right? This is where I think this thought process comes in. We know that tension I'm feeling in the gut, it's just like I'm feeling anxious and like nauseous, right? It's just like feel that expression. Let's label it, let's understand it, and then we can find the why, and then we can start to change it.
Well, what is the difference between fear and anxiety?
What is the difference between
anxiety?
Fear and anxiety?
Yeah.
Well, they would both be governed by. So fear and anxiety.
I have a different.
Anxiety would be more of like a worry about the future, and fear would be about what may happen, and fear would be like an immediate response about what is happening now. Yeah,
right. But they're both driving like the same parts of your body.
Yeah, they're both.
But doesn't excitement do the same thing?
Excitement give you the same.
Anxiety is an abstract thought causing your body to be in fear
about the future,
whereas
fear. Okay.
Fear is an environmental.
Fear is just danger right here, right
danger
now.
Versus danger.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay.
But they're both showing up the same way.
Okay.
In people's bodies. Yeah. I've experienced fear and I've experienced anxiety. It's seemingly the same thing.
Yes.
I think there's a little bit more of a heightened visceral experience with fear, though, like genuine fear. Because I've experienced fear where I thought my life was, completely irrational circumstances, and I was under the influence of substances. But, I've experienced that visceral fear of like, I am going to die. I need to leave the situation if I don't stay.
Yeah.
And, that heightened sense, very akin to anxiety, but I think it's a lot more like instinctual.
Well, I think you also, when it's anxiety because it's abstract, then like the solution normally, you think the solution has to be abstract, whereas with fear, it's present.
Yes.
And so it's navigable in the material world.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm not sure if navigable.
But if you're able to navigate it.
Yes.
Navigable.
Let's make it one. I mean, if it isn't, it is now. So
yeah, but like you can navigate it in the material world. Like
if
someone's coming at you, you can navigate that in the material world. Whereas like anxiety largely is not a material threat; it's an abstract one. And so, in order for you to solve that problem, it has to be we think it has to be an abstract solution.
Yeah.
But the solution might end up being in your body.
So would both of those be governed maybe by the kidney, lower back region?
I mean, I think it's more of like a root thing, right? Think about safety, security.
Sure.
So yeah. I'm thinking on that. Me personally, we think about it on that level. But I love the acronym for fear in relation to anxiety. False evidence appearing real.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
I love that. But if I had to, for anybody out there who might need a little tip when it comes to dealing with this stuff, it's be man.
What's that?
Be man.
Breathe, move, accept what the circumstances, and then what are your needs and wants in that situation.
I dig it.
So get in the breath, right? So you regulate the nervous system.
Yeah.
Move, right? Because if I'm just sitting here all anxious, like let's just get up, do some movement, right? Get a couple breaths, whatever it may be. The circumstance is what it is, right? We have to accept what it is. This is my environment, right? This is what's going on. Some of it might just be up here. And then what are your needs and wants? What is it that is giving you anxiety? What do you need and want from the situation? Or what do you need and want next too? Just a little.
Yeah.
A little something.
To put Love it, man.
I like it.
So from here, you had this experience. What was your steps to navigating and overcoming and becoming and coming to where you are
now? Wow. So, I'm like halfway through law school.
This is very opening for me. I'm learning a lot about you today.
Oh yeah, you guys haven't really hung out.
Yeah,
not this deep, at least,
like, okay, I mean, to go even deeper on it, I was, I got out of the Army. I got a job out in Arizona working, doing some corporate stuff. Something was wrong. Body which wasn't reacting, and I've been like so in my body my whole life that I was getting pushed into my head, and I just wasn't super understanding of it or comfortable with it, and I was like, screw it, I'm gonna go to law school. Maybe that'll, if I have a new profession, I can focus on something.
Oh yeah.
External validation.
Yeah,
Tell me something else. Give me something else.
Tell me what to do.
Yeah, there you go.
And like I get to law school and like shockingly, it's not scratching the itch. But also like I
would have thought
I had picked to go to law school because like normally in a situation like that, I'd be like, all right, well, I'm just gonna like go do something super physical, and the problem will be gone.
Yeah, but then you couldn't.
But I didn't have that option anymore.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I'll go something brain and see if the problem goes away, which it just made it worse.
Go something brain.
Yeah.
Go something brain. Let me try to rationalize and put logic into this.
Right. Which made it worse because then you have a bunch of if-then logic stuck in your seeing the contradictions around you. It's very annoying.
Okay. You're saying when you went into law school?
That's when like
you started to see how the world works.
Yeah, well, I had always been looking for a purpose in an organization or a tribe, and then I remember thinking after the military being like, I really enjoyed being a soldier. I was dissatisfied with how we were used, and that's just the nature of being a soldier, I think.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, I told myself, because I'd been in some predicaments that I didn't want to ever allow my actions to be guarded by a institution or organization that I didn't fully trust ever again. And then, went to law school. Nonetheless,
went to law school.
About a year into law school, my body, I'm still working out, but my body's just slowing down. And it got to the point where I would say like the first semester of 2L year, I just stopped working out. I was like, I guess I'm just like I go on walks now. And this is coming from someone who's like grown up moving, loved skydiving, loved running, did marathons, whatever. Like if it's moving, I'm in. And then suddenly it was like, I can take my chihuahua on walks, and this is about as much as I can do.
Better than some people.
Yeah. You got to be grateful for some things, but I was not.
Yeah. Of course not. Yeah. I mean,
I was not grateful.
Yeah.
And then, we had a mountain weekend. We talked about yoga a lot, and I was going through a rough chapter, and I said, screw it. Can't do the gym, but at least I'll do yoga. I'm going to do that every day. So for 6 months, I did yoga like 5 days a week.
It's a lot of yoga.
And then I walked across Spain, and that was like part of this process. Doing the Camino de Santiago, just to like get my body moving again.
So cool.
And really just to like prove to myself that I could
to get
still
your
move.
body. Yeah.
I guess. To me, it was just like,
how many miles is that again?
Needed to do a walk.
I don't know. It was like over 200, I think, is what we did.
Right. I just think of a lot of people to walk to.
For sure.
I mean, obviously, it's broken up. You're not doing it straight, but like,
you're doing between 15 and 25 miles a day until you're done.
Was that 4 or 5 hours? 6 hours?
6 hours, 8 hours, depends on like if you stop for lunch, grab a bottle of wine, and keep walking.
Yeah.
You're walking through towns and stuff.
Yeah. That's the thing about El Camino is like it's not like going on the Appalachian Trail where you're
just
packing it in,
up and down
out,
hills all day.
Yeah, like there's some terrain that's not great, but like you want to stop for an espresso and a croissant, like it's a couple of kilometers away.
I'd love
that. Sounds great.
It's a good time. Did that, came back from that, moved back to Charleston, and like really got into surfing again, which allowed me to just feel everything coming up into like one moment of like, okay, this is where I belong. Like I belong on this surfboard, I belong doing yoga, and I belong going on long walks. And I don't need to move heavy weight. I don't need to do a lot of the standards that I had held.
James Island.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the whole thing here.
I held myself to these like physical standards that I'd grown up with. We went to the Citadel together. I had to be the fastest, the strongest, whatever. In the Army, as an officer, especially in Ranger Regiment, like you need to be in good shape.
Yeah.
But I didn't need to be in that kind of like shape anymore. Yeah. I just needed to be in the shape that allowed me to create.
I think that's an important point too.
Yeah.
Back to the
like what are
humanization.
Your goals? Like what is it that you need?
Well, it's like half the shit. Like, okay, so like I train people. I'm at the gym. One of my goals is to go heavy on a lot of different things or do certain really funky, cool. But like, not everybody needs to do that kind of stuff.
Well, it's not going to serve a lot of people.
No,
like a lot of people, that's not going to be a direct correlation between that exercise you're trying to build up to.
There's elements of it that can be though.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like landmine stuff.
Landmine stuff can help with most things.
I think
kettlebell movements can help with
super important.
So many different things in life.
Yeah, but not everybody needs to juggle kettlebells.
Yeah, it's not necessary for a lot of people.
I mean, like even the rope flows helped me out so much. We talked about how it's opened my torso.
Engine.
It's opened my torso. So after my surgery, my torso felt locked in place.
Yeah.
And I have the they broke my ribs for the surgery, and I have a bunch of scar tissue on this left-hand side that like didn't let me open at all in the left. My heart is on the left. My left lung is the damaged one on the left. And so like
I add, in a metaphysical sense, the left side of the body is feminine, but also your relationship to yourself.
Oh yeah. We can go into that one.
Yeah. Well, maybe that might be a little much. We're already going pretty deep.
But like, so I couldn't open my body on this side. And you know, yoga really helped. Getting back into like walking long distances really helped. That's something I loved in the Army and I love now.
Yeah.
Walking long distances. And then with surfing, like I'm always here for it. With surfing,
I love long hikes.
With surfing, you got to open up a lot.
Have to. In many different planes.
Big time. Well, this is why, to cut you off, this is why I want you to start loading landmines.
Yeah.
I think that being able to stay really, really tight and strong here on the right side while completely extending everything through the left and integrating that all the way through your body and start loading that with weight, bro, that's good. You're going to see the same level of progression you saw when you started picking up the rope.
Well, so like,
you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. I've given in to my, dude, it's
this is
huge for my servers. Huge for my servers.
That's a big one
for me, I told you before, it cut a minute and a half off my mile time, and I don't run.
Yeah.
I just was just.
We're just going head over foot, and we're loading that position
with forward intent. And you're finding those extreme ranges. But I think we're getting really sidetracked on the movement piece.
Yeah, go ahead.
And we got a lot deeper into your story here. But so there was the law school aspect where you were trying to like dive deeper into the logic to understand. And we, the question was, how did you work through that? Right? How did you come to a place where you could be where you are now? So there was the element of rope flow, there was the element of yoga, surfing, but on the mental piece, where was the switch? What was the mental switch?
What was the catalyst?
Yeah. That one spark that lit the flame.
When I do things, I have a very specific mentality about it. It's like, if I'm doing it, I'm doing it.
Yeah. Very intentional. I've always been that way.
Yeah. And if I'm doing it, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
So
mentality.
When I
you can't train that.
Action oriented. Yeah, you can.
You can, but come on. Some people are born with it.
When I was,
I'm not me. I'll tell you that much.
When I was in the chapter that I call Sad Boy Hours, I was like, I'm gonna fucking do this. Like, I'm gonna fix this. Like, this is not how I anticipate living life. I'm going to design my life. And that also means that I have to design my mind, because I'm obviously perceiving things in a manner that is not to my benefit. It's not
suboptimal.
It's suboptimal. But I think of this in the sense of like post-traumatic stress disorder, actually, because I think that everyone has, according to the DSM-5, which is non-empirical, blah 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 blah.
We notice that everybody has some form.
Everybody has some form of PTSD, whether on the big scale or the small scale, like in some way, shape, or form.
And it's relative too.
It's all relative.
Somebody's, wartime trauma, is not necessarily like tenfold, more impactful than somebody's, experience with being bullied.
And exactly. Yeah. Whether abstract fear or real fear, the neural pathways are being drawn the same way.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The emotions are being felt the same way.
Yeah.
So like everybody's got the same kind of thing happening to them, whether it's a big T trauma or small T trauma is relative. They're being conditioned to, not they're being conditioned, they're receiving information and their body's responding in a way that increases their adaptability and survival for that environment, right? Yeah. And then the post-traumatic stress disorder part of it, that we cling to in like the Western perspective, is that, you're dysfunctional because you have these survival skills that aren't relevant in your current environment.
Yeah.
But what it really, in my view, this is totally non-clinical, is like, you developed survival skills for one environment, whether that was your household growing up, your high school growing up, a war zone, whatever, it doesn't matter. You develop survival skills, and now you're in a different environment, and those survival skills aren't serving you anymore. This could show up in relationships. This could show up in friendships, community, your self-perception, anything. If you developed a self-perception that helped you survive in one circumstance, then you change your environment and it's holding you back, it just means that you need to redraw your neural pathways on it. You need to move through that and understand that it was a survival mechanism for one environment that's no longer relevant in the new one.
Yeah, just like if you injure your leg and you develop a limp.
Yeah.
Right? Something like that.
Well, that's like functional.
That's what I'm hearing.
That's functional and dysfunctional compensations, and
absolutely.
But I like the old adage of what got you here won't get you there. So it's like the same thing with your style of training, right? It's just like, how do I move through this? Let me just get back in the gym and do compression. When it's just like, is that the case? Why don't you try yoga? Why don't you do something new?
Train for the garden.
Train for the garden.
The answer to your problems is found outside of the movements you're currently doing.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Sometimes.
I mean,
unless what you're doing is working.
then it will get you there.
But I mean, like, even then, right? We were earlier talking about like what standard you're training to.
Sure. Yeah. Like what are
and it's one thing for an athlete with a sport or a first responder with a mission or whatever to train to a standard, and that's great. But this stuff that you guys teach and train can help them avoid the common injuries and pitfalls and later in life issues that these athletes and first responders have. Because when you're a ranger, you're training for the ranger mission, and no one's really thinking about how this is going to affect you when you're 60. You're jumping out of planes, you're hurting your knees, you're pushing through the pain on everything.
Accumulation of micro traumas.
Right. And so athletes are doing the same thing because, winning that rugby game or that basketball game or football game is like the mission.
Sure.
And, these guys are putting themselves all the way into it. But if you're training for that mission, but then not also training for the human side of it, then, I always say that athletes, especially college and pro athletes, have more in common with veterans than we give them credit for, because on day one, they're on a team. They train for the mission every day. They wear the jersey every day, and they're part of the tribe. And then on day two, all of that's gone. The mission is gone. The team is gone. The jersey is gone. And you're no longer playing the game. So if you get to that day, and everybody will, when they're no longer playing the game, no matter what it is, and you haven't trained for what's left, which is just being a human, then you're going to be left with the issues in your knees, the issues with your hips, the issues with your back that you could ignore for all that time. But now, because you're not moving like you used to, are way more painful than they needed to be. That's my pitch for you guys.
No, I mean, you're not wrong. But I think if you had a good coach in college, or you knew what someone was doing, you won't necessarily be there. But I think that's more uncommon, and this is why this conversation is necessary.
I think people are starting to wake up, though.
People are starting to wake up.
You look at like strength and conditioning coaches from 10 to 15, 20 years ago, probably less of a holistic movement, rotational component to their style of training, and more along the lines of, how can we train heavier in a linear path and then go out on the field and run and do sprints?
Yeah, it's just like
sport specific.
It's like, I always hate when
people are adapting.
I don't like when people react to when I use the word Western. To describe
Western,
things.
you can trigger some people in a conversation by,
and there's no values judgment assigned to it, right? It just is what it is.
Everything has a place,
right? It's our Western perspective on things being linear and inputs and outputs and like no other variables.
Yes,
but I think the thing for me is like I always considered myself to be someone who is in shape.
Yeah.
But I was training on running. I was training on lifting. And it was just a linear progression on those things, but you never find what your weaknesses are because you're not moving your body in a way that it might not move normally. You're just following the...
Yeah. And I think that goes into the conversation of health too.
Yeah.
Because I think I'd like to believe that the perspective is shifting as a standard amongst society, but like that health and fitness are not the same thing at all. because you could be super fit, but that doesn't mean you're healthy.
Well, I think it's the divisions that we make between things that ruin our
Yeah,
understanding.
the
of it.
division,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
I'm here doing this right now.
Or look
I can
like your
only- What are
you training
traditional
today?
old school body.
What are you training today?
Oh,
Yeah.
damn.
What's your split?
Yeah.
You know, like nothing wrong with that. Do it if it's working for you. Obviously.
My sister
Yes.
always makes fun of me because she knows my answer to it. If anybody asks me,
What's
what
your
am I
answer to
training?
it?
It's
your-
life.
Hell yeah.
What are you training today? What are you
Life.
training for?
Yeah.
Dude, I mean, even
Life.
post surgery, I would go to the gym and I would just sit there and not have anywhere to start until I started playing. And I was like, I'm gonna move this around. I'm gonna move this around. I'm gonna
So that works really well for you, yeah.
just playing.
Yeah.
I have
I think
no
it
idea
works
what I'm
well
doing
for
there.
most people too. Like
I
I
think-
do that with
Well, there's got to be a
clients.
play. There needs to be a playful. But I'll tell you what, though, we're talking like traditional strength training and like training in a linear way for people who haven't been exposed to it can be very therapeutic.
I almost think it's a necessary place to start.
Yeah, all right. You know what? That's actually probably true because look at any good mover. Like anybody
They
you know
started
that's
with
strong as hell.
bodybuilding and strength training.
Yes.
What's the
Always.
What's the baby thing you start everybody out with?
The baby thing you
The
started?
baby rock that you have.
The OS,
Yeah.
original strength.
What do you
That's the OS resets the rocks.
Oh yeah, the
Yeah.
rockers. Yeah.
And then
Well, or cat cows.
but still,
cat
like
cows.
we talked in the moment, we were
Yeah.
talking about why we did that. It's like as a baby, you're moving around like this. Okay, like you're talking building block, basic fundamentals of moving.
Some infant development
Some
rocks.
infant
Yeah.
development rocks. Like we've
Yeah.
known each other for what, 15 years,
Yeah.
and you've been coaching me for a couple months, and
14.
14. And like, and I'm sitting there with my egos. So I run marathons, man. Like I'm a man. And then he's like, do baby rocks. I'm like, oh my God, this is actually changing how my body moves.
Yeah, it's huge, man.
I just love being on all fours. I think it's just so important.
Well, I mean,
You need to be
from
able to
like
crawl and
rehabilitative, prehabilitative standpoint, as you were saying,
yeah.
right? It's how we develop. These are the building blocks, right? So if somebody's struggling to do something standing up, put them non-maxillary loaded, put them on all fours, and see how they move.
Yeah.
It can tell you a lot. Have them crawl.
Mhm.
You can see if they're able to stabilize their pelvis.
And it's fun
See.
too.
And it's fun. It's funny because I get
have a lot
all
of
the
fun.
time. You put people who are like
With that.
this bravado or machismo, and you put them in these positions,
Yeah.
and it's the same thing. It's like, what are we doing? And then they're like, oh, my knees just decompressed, and I can feel how tight my posterior chain is, and like it's just like.
You got to remind people
Just-
that they're monkeys.
Cat cows. That's huge.
But it's more nuanced. All things are more nuanced, right?
Of course.
Because we're not
You
meant for
know.
solely brachiation either.
You
You
can
know.
talk.
Yeah, true.
Well, the thing is, like, you can back to language, right? Like, you can talk yourself.
We didn't
into
even go
it.
into that.
And
Back to
we're,
language.
we're using English, right? Which is good at dividing and
Yeah.
describing.
Mm.
And so, like, when we talk about things, of course, there's nuance, and it flows all the way down to the bottom. It's turtles all the way down. But maybe this comes back to what we're saying: if like you get somebody in there and just playing, take the logic out of it.
Yeah.
Take the rational. Like, hey, I'm explaining to you why this works. It's your, this leads to this, and they're not internalizing. I'm not internalizing that. You say stuff to me all the time. It makes sense, logical sense. Roger that. I do the motion, and
But
it's
you're not-
different.
Yeah.
Because the logic part takes away from the play,
Sure.
and the play
And the
is the
feeling.
movement. Right? Because when we're moving,
Yeah.
if we're rationalizing our movement, are we moving?
Well, this kind of like makes me think of something we were talking about earlier about like movement screens and like how I was saying like sometimes I feel like it's maybe even better to like start somebody out by seeing how they move as opposed to giving them a movement screen.
Yes. And then I said, and then I
Well,
said,
that's
it's
nuanced.
more nuanced.
It's definitely more nuanced.
Yeah.
But
Turtles all the way down.
yeah. I mean,
Well,
a lot
it's like
of
for me,
reasons.
like,
you
so
want
like,
people to have fun.
I went through the check system, so it's corrective holistic exercise kinesiology,
Yeah.
and my assessment process can be very in depth, and it covers the whole entire board. And I measure your pelvis and your spine,
Yeah.
and see if you have an atlas thing going on, and then let's do length tension assessments, then core testing, and then we do movement, and like it builds on top of itself. Because if someone is experiencing pain, and I have them on the table, and I say activate your core via a blood
Mhm.
pressure cuff, and they can't do it
Mm-hmm.
on a table with a blood pressure cuff, why am I going to test for their core stability and movement
Exactly.
if they can't do it with gravity taken away and movement taken away, and you're as still as you could possibly be?
But
Yeah.
so we were talking about mind-body connection though. So like,
Sure.
let's put ourselves in the shoes of the client, right? And like we can sit and have these conversations. We're like decently versed. You guys especially are decently versed in the topics. But are we putting the client into their heads
Yeah.
when we approach them like this?
Well, so that's where like the changing or like updating of your language is so important when working with different clients, right? If I have somebody, like I was talking about this with a physical therapist today, like about how like interesting it is to like work with a client who practices yoga, because I can just say more cow in the spine, boom, they do it, right? Like I'd be like, now this is like up dog, done. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you can say the same thing with like, whatever the cue is of bringing your shoulder blades together or just opening the
You'd
chest.
be like someone who's more experienced,
right?
Say retraction,
protraction.
yeah, whatever.
Yeah, like you update your language, right? If I have a client who is an OT, right? So those are the terms I'm using with her.
Yeah.
And those click really quickly. So
yeah, it's like pull your shoulder blades back and squeeze them like there's a pencil there. And like someone who understands that, who doesn't move.
The best practitioners or the best coaches like can update their language as needed, right?
Right.
Gotta be like water.
Be like water, be a chameleon.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And also environment plays a big role too. So if I have someone who's very visibly noticed, visibly nervous,
yes,
I have to break it down in a way that like that assessment process, it also can be very like you're being very seen. So as a male, if I'm going to do it and I need to see bony land structures and muscles and how things sit, it's just like, well, come in shorts and that's it. So now you're seen and you're on full display. So then this is where the breathing changes. This is where okay, let's assess your breathing. They're doing all this stuff. Yeah. So it's environment.
What do you think people's, hey, we're going to do this assessment for you. What do you think the subconscious reaction to that is? Depends on the person.
That's a good question.
But it depends on the person. It's always relative. But it's like if you look at America, most people are not in the gym. Most people are not moving. What is their subconscious reaction to a physical assessment? That's probably fear.
I think it depends on the archetype of the person.
Yeah.
And I was talking about this with Eli earlier, where he's like, some people I know from get-go, I'm bringing them in and we're working out. We're lifting weights. We're moving, right? But then there's another archetype that sees the value in the movement screen.
Depends on the person. It depends on the first conversation. Like
I think most of the time it's going to be a combination of the two. Right? Most people want to move and have fun, but learn something about themselves in the process.
I think it also relates to the level of their current experience, right? So if someone's having a lot of pain,
who they work,
it's just like they'll be like, please do everything and like help me. You know, I've been dealing with this chronic pain for years and the chiropractor hasn't helped and all this kind of stuff. But then you get some people that are just like, all right, so you're a personal trainer and we're going to move. Great. So it's like, we'll do movement patterns. And like, honestly, some things you could just read. And I had a mentor put it this way for me one time. There's this railroad, the LIRR on Long Island, that basically goes from New York City all the way almost out to Montauk Riverhead, basically. It's like, you could have someone get on the Riverhead station. That's where they are. We want to take them to Penn Station. We want to take them into the city. But like, they get on there. If you take them 2 stops away, you still took them from where they were to where they needed to go. Even if you guys get off, they get back on and go back to Riverhead. You still did your job.
Yeah.
Even though you want them to do everything and go to Penn Station, right? So it's like just meeting people where they're at.
Well, I think one thing that I heard from you was like, you see somebody who said, "Oh, the chiropractor didn't fix it." I'm starting to think about like some conversations we've had of like, at the end of the day, there's only one person who can heal you, right? And that is yourself.
And that is
yourself. You are your healer. There are good coaches, practitioners, doctors, whoever else out there that can help your body heal itself, but nobody else is going to do it. It's going to be you.
Wake up in the morning, your back is stiff, do your OS, do your infant development rocks, do your body rolls, right? Do the straight leg rocks, do your spidey hip openers, the terminology for things we teach, but you know, do these things, tell me how you feel after. Oh, you feel good? Great. Those are your tools now. I'm just here to teach you. I can open the door, only you can walk through, right? Okay? Great stuff.
Love it.
Cool.
Well, it's also last point here.
Yeah.
When you teach and show someone something, there has to be a dopamine reward at the end that locks it in.
Yeah, like a little treat.
A little treat. Just a little treat. A cookie. There's got to be a cookie.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just how I work.
And that's different depending on the client too.
Yeah.
Right.
It also depends on the session.
And the session, right? Yeah.
But thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
I
man.
think that's huge. I think we can do
Really
more of
appreciate
this. I think there's more to do.
I think we
More
should
to dig.
deep dive into some other specific topics that we started to deep dive into today.
Yeah.
Down to chat anytime.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do this again.
Always a good time.
Yeah. Cool.
Appreciate
That's that,
it.
man.
Yeah.
Episode 1.